Thanks, sir. Okay, so, picking up where we left off. Dopamine is the metaphor for our age. The neurotransmitter stands in for the accelerated up cycles in our mood. What digital media use has done is, there's points made, this last week, is this stuff frying our brains? No. It's not a case of anyone's brain being fried, and fried brains is not great, right? But instead of us being fried, we are being rewired. The neurotransmitter dopamine is an important aspect in the rewiring of our brains themselves. And what we mean by the accelerated up cycles is a continual need to have spikes of dopamine in our system. Historically, dopamine has always been an important chemical for human beings to have, because basically it makes us feel happy. But the cycles by which we needed this were long. What social media use has done is accelerated those cycles. And we need that euphoric high more and more and more. But what happens when you increase the rate, or if you increase the wavelength of when you get the highs, the crashes become worse. So now we're in a continual high crash, high crash, high crash. You get a high, you crash down. And that is what we call an excitation peak, and it's an inevitable part of getting a high from anything. That regret that we've talked about is the crash. Yeah. Now, over a period of time, the reason why we stick with something like TikTok for 5-6 hours is you can keep that crash away. You can keep on getting the high, the high, the high, the high. You swipe, you swipe, you swipe, you swipe, you swipe. You keep on swiping to find that good thing. Keep on swiping. Because you're fighting against the crash. But as soon as you put it down, bang, your mood will crash. Unfortunately, a crash that involves dopamine creates one particular outlet, which is numbness. This is why people say that gambling makes them feel alive, or heroin makes them feel alive, or cigarettes make me feel more with it. If they don't, actually what you're fighting against is the crash in your judgments. There's no real life consequences here. These constant psychological bursts keep you hooked, and as a result, what is left with us is that we are dead inside. There is no us, there is just a little id monster that wants more, and there is no actual emotional attachment to anything. We feel defeated, overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, nervous, stupid, silly, useless. By a show of hands, people, and don't be afraid, do any of those words correspond to how some of you might feel as human beings? Oh yeah. Defeated all the fucking time. Overwhelmed, constantly, stressed like you wouldn't fucking believe. My fingernails. Anxious, nervous, stupid all the time, silly, useless, totally. What we need to understand is that all of that is programmed. That's by design. The systems we use have been designed to make us feel that way. This is not us. You are not stupid. You are not silly. You are not useless. But what you use on a daily basis for hours and hours and hours is designed to make you feel that way. It is the purpose of that design. That is why I raised the point of design as being really important. When you design a system to tap into this neurotransmitter network, the inevitable outcome of messing around with this is you're going to provoke that. That is what's going to happen. And that is what happens when we are using social media. You can't detox from it. Because detoxing only gets rid of the symptom. It doesn't correct the pathology itself. This is why celebrities are going to detox because they're cokeheads or whatever, right? inevitably, 6 months later, they're back on the junk. Right? Alcoholics that go into rehab, great, good for you, I'm glad you're doing something about your problem. You're going to be back on it. Rehab only works if you have counselling with it. If you get to the point of why you have to abuse those chemicals in the first place, and it's usually some kind of traumatic thing, right? And you need help with that. And that's okay. People feel scared to ask for help, but it really is okay to ask for help. So we go for flaws, it's not right? But we always push the idea, oh, I can have digital, I'm going to take 2 weeks off it. Do you think you can get better? Take 10 years off. It ain't going to fix any of the problems. Problems are already going to be ingrained. It's not going to do anything about it. The push to do that is just another strategy, basically, to make you more efficient, more hardworking, more grinding to get things done. Exactly like social media tries to get you to do. It's like, that's not how things work, I'm afraid. And I've used this quote before, but deleting social media is really an unrealistic way to live your life. Because deleting social media is the same as deleting roads. It's just impossible. What we need to understand instead, and what we need to do, is come to an accommodation with how we use social media. Okay? We need understanding, and we need then to develop what we call a free relationship with it. Don't be the slave to it, be the master of it. But that's not so easy to do. But when we understand the core tenets of what social media is, it makes it easier to position ourselves in a way in which we can have a healthy relationship with it. Because there is such a thing as a healthy relationship with social media. It's just most of us don't achieve that. Now, Adam Greenfield, in his book Radical Technologies, states that social media has the emotional tenor of sadness and melancholy. Sadness emerges really when we're exhausted. Sadness is a product of exhaustion. So what do you think Adam's technique for this is? Adam Greenfield said something really nice about this. He said, I was a very engaging speaker. I buy that mantra. After engagement with likes, comments, texts, etc., we are empty and indifferent. This is designed, therefore we use the term sad by design. The only way to deal with the exhaustion of the online world is to cut down how much we use it. Not to not use it, because Greenfield would admit that that's an impossibility. And not to limit it by putting things like screen limits on, 15 minutes a day, something like that, because that just creates unrealistic goals which we can't achieve. But instead, approach these things as, I'm just going to give myself 10 minutes to do this. I'm going to give myself 15 minutes. I'm not going to sit here with nothing to do for the rest of the night and occupy it with Instagram. Because that is the root of feeling ungrateful about yourself. Instead, try and take control. Because it's a weird thing that's going to happen, actually. You've got 5 weeks until you've got to submit the assignment for this module, right? About 5 weeks. Now, in the next couple of weeks, this is going to happen to about 75% of you, so listen. Everyone listen. Or don't. Fuck if you listen or not, to be honest. But I'm giving you advice. And at some point in the next few weeks, some of you are going to feel like this project is taking over. And, that it's becoming big. And that you're going to start oh my God, I can't do this, or I can't do that because this project I've got to do. You're in control of the project. The project is not in control of you. The project is not a thing that exists to exert control. It is not even an animate object. It is a conceptual structure which you are executing. It isn't scary. It isn't going to hurt you. It can't punish you. It doesn't exist in that way. You're in control. Get it done when you get it done. When you feel able to get it done. Yeah? Stop thinking of assignments and uni work as being your boss. You're your boss. They're just things that you're executing to achieve what you want. How's that for a different way of looking at things? I wish I could actually do that myself, but I don't. So, boredom. I'm going to cover that in the seminar tomorrow on that slide. Which reminds me, I'll go and do the seminar slides after this lecture, okay? Boredom. A hugely important thing. Many of you are going to talk about boredom in your assignments. You're going to talk about your Instagram use, and you're going to say, I use Instagram when I'm bored. And do you know what that's like? And none of you are going to think, well, maybe those who aren't here today, are not going to think about what boredom actually is. Because boredom is incredibly important. And again, boredom is something that social media both creates and exploits. It creates it, but also exploits it in terms of traffic. What does boredom even mean? Well, boredom is all about being stuck. The sense of being bored is a sense of being stuck somewhere. Tedium is never alleviated by all efforts, including a Wi-Fi connection to social media. You can't get rid of that feeling of being bored. It's just there. It'll go, like all feelings do. We're in a world in which has never, ever had so many things we can be stimulated by. We are in an information-rich world. We're in an entertainment-rich world. You have a device in your hands which can allow you to access any form of entertainment you want. It's never happened before in the history of humankind, and yet we are bored shitless. All of us. It's like, oh my God, it's so boring. Oh, what am I going to do tonight? I'm bored. You can do anything you want, but we're bored all the time. Boredom is absolutely chronic. It makes no sense again. It's a paradox. You have the entire history of human knowledge at your fingertips at any time of the day, and yet we're bored. Next time you're bored, go and find out, I don't know, how to build a ship. You can. Just type it into Google. It will give you the instructions. Go knock yourself out, build the fucking ship if you want to. I'm not saying go and build it. Find it out. Do you know how to build a ship? No. Well, there's something for you to do. I'm not setting it as an extra credit assignment or anything. But you could do that if you wanted to. But instead, we don't do that. Oh, I've got on Instagram for like 8 million years, and so we'll be less bored then. Well, maybe we need to rethink boredom. Boredom is an absolutely necessary part of being a human being. And boredom is not a negative thing. Many of the great ideas come from when people are bored. I do my best thinking when I'm bored. Publishers ask me to write books about things. I get myself into a state of boredom, think through what I'm going to actually do. Because all of a sudden that works. When all the stimulation is gone, I can think. I can actually think clearly about the world. Now, that's a particular type of boredom called philosophical boredom, a site of creation. A space through which all the distractions of the world disappear, and we can actually think clearly about things. But for Mark Kingwell, there is a different kind of boredom, what we call neoliberal boredom, which relies on the workings of an attention economy in which we are willing participants. Boredom and the maintenance of boredom is essential to the base of that. For Kingwell, what boredom is in the contemporary age is the urge to pick up your device and start doom scrolling. And the activity of doom scrolling is the fundamental economic basis of contemporary society. That aimless scroll through loads of content generates data, which generates profits. That is the boredom which we're familiar with today. Not the philosophical boredom that's like, do you know what, there's nothing to do, I'm going to think up of an entirely new economic philosophy. I'm going to do that right now. Marx must have been bored shitless. That's all I can say. Because I've read, Das Kapital, and it's like that. Apparently he was bored. It's like, holy shit, dude. Your life must have sucked. But something good came out of it. So this isn't the boredom of Martin Heidegger, this isn't the boredom of Soren Kierkegaard, who argued that boredom is the principle of all men. To be a man was to be bored. There is no escape from it. We should just embrace it because it's a good thing. For Kingwell, neoliberal boredom is all about the urge to get us to engage more with stuff that we didn't need in the first instance. Now, for Martin Heidegger, there were three kinds of boredom. Boredom as awaiting, boredom as something surprising, and boredom as a fundamental, covering the expanse of our existence. I'm not going to go too much into this because, one, Heidegger's a deeply unpleasant character, but two, this is not a philosophy degree. We're not going to do existentialism and phenomenology in this course. But what Heidegger is pointing out, especially in that third point, is that boredom is fundamental. Boredom is something which is hardwired into human beings. And what boredom allows us to do for Heidegger is feel what he calls a sense of homesickness. And that's really important because he contrasted the idea of feeling at home, which he says is something where we feel safe and good, and it's the state that we want to be in as human beings. It's not home as in the house. It is a feeling of being at home that he's talking about. Whereas boredom is a state of homelessness. That we feel angst. We don't feel comfortable. We feel uncanny. We feel something's wrong. He doesn't mean that as a bad thing, because the feeling of homelessness drives us to achieve that feeling of being at home. So we're in a continual cycle in which, we get bored and we think, I need to make things better. Therefore, boredom is a fundamental part of human beings actually advancing in the world. My point would be on that, there's Heidegger in his home, carrying water from the well. Where is home in the digital world? Is home Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or WhatsApp? Is that where we feel most at home? That feeling of belonging? Where do we feel like we belong? Because digital media messes with that. It continually pushes and pulls us to different things. It continually makes us feel like we are at home on a platform like Instagram, and then rips that out from under us by making us feel anxious and sad and lonely all of a sudden. We're continually in those spikes again. Now, Kingwell actually identifies 5 kinds of boredom. Boredom is a philosophical originary, the space for thinking. Psychoanalytic boredom. Political boredom, which is actually a concept from Theodore Adorno. Creative boredom, or we're so bored that we can't do something which is cool. But the one he's concerned with is neoliberal boredom, the natural extension of the background conditions of 21st century capitalism. You get so overstimulated by stuff that you get bored by it. And the cure to that boredom is to get overstimulated again. That's basically Kingwell's argument here. We live in a world where stimulation is everywhere all the time. And we get bored of being stimulated all the time. It's kind of amazing that we get bored of TikTok. Do you know what I think about that? It's like, there's just mad shit on it all the time. How can you be bored of it? There's just crazy shit all the time. It's amazing. But I'm so bored. And then how do I cure my boredom with TikTok? Well, don't get on TikTok. Because that will happen. This continual cycle of curing boredom with more boredom. I hope it's not lost on anyone that, what we're trying to achieve at university is this kind of boredom. Some of you might think, the lectures and seminars that you have are boring. There's a reason. So we're trying to create and foster an environment of philosophical originary, whereby keeping you bored shitless to the point of going to sleep, you're going to come up with the great ideas that will power society in the future. Do you believe any word I just said? No, of course, bollocks. If you're bored shitless in lectures, it's not just shit. Okay? That is not philosophical boredom. I'm not sure what kind of boredom it falls in. They're probably political boredom, but yeah, if you are bored shitless in the lecture, just have a line or whatever helps you get through, all right? Now, in the 20th century, which we are not in anymore, we're in the 21st century, But in the 20th century, in a consumerist century, effectively, boredom was counteracted by spending. You're bored with your life, go out and buy a new sofa. That will help, you know. You feel like your life's getting dull, how about a new car? That will help you. I think I'm doing this in a very mocking tone, but that's a real assumption. That's really how it works, you know. Boredom and capitalism were intrinsically linked with one another. And the cycle of production of new goods really relied on people getting bored with the stuff they had, so you could replace it with new stuff. Now we produce and consume ourselves. What we are doing in social media culture is we are creating content, consuming content, in a continual loop of production and consumption of our own souls. Yeah?
You made a point of social media a couple of weeks ago saying how it makes us want to buy things or trying to buy things,
Sure.
right? So surely that's not, surely the trend of the 21st century, the 20th century
It's
is
not dead.
still a main one today.
Well, I think it's the mode by which we buy things which is important here. So in the 20th century, it was a sort of aspirational lifestyle thing, right? That, you know, well, you go to the existence, your house is looking a bit rubbish, you know, get down to B&Q and paint it. That will make you feel better about it. The important thing to think about house is who is doing the advertising. Now, in the social media world, it is us. It may not be you and I directly, right? But the people that we identify. I'm going to show of hands. Who's bought something that they've seen on TikTok here? I have, right? Good, okay. Now, I'm just going to use myself as an example here, okay? I've bought two things off TikTok, okay? I bought a nail clippers, which collects your nails for you when you're doing the clipping. I thought, that is going to change my fucking life back, because I'm inevitably clipping my nails when I'm in bed or something, and you know what it's like, you're in bed then afterwards, and you've missed one, and it ends up getting stuck in you or something like that, and it goes septic, and you have to, you know, it's a whole thing, you know, I can do without, you know? And then I bought, alright, if you thought that was exciting, just step back, alright, because this is the balls, right? I bought a washing up drainer, right, that has a little spout at the bottom, which takes all the water that runs off the dishes through the base. You know what I'm talking about, you've seen this product, haven't you? She's laughing, she bought one, right? And then it pushes it back, all the water back into the sink. I was like, I am never ever going to have to clean my sink top ever again. This is the fucking shit, this stuff. £5, TikTok, took about a month to come like, but when it turned up, I got it straight out, did some washing up just to see how it worked. You know, I didn't even eat off the plates. You know, some of the plates were covered with wanking anyway, so they needed a bit of wash like. Stood there, watched it, and was like, yeah, this is fucking immense. Like, you know, this is a new, this talk about brave new world. This was like, oh yeah. That wasn't sold to me by a celebrity. That was sold to me by some fucking rando on TikTok who's like, yeah, and it's not even a person, right? It's just a voice. You know, this thing will let you do this, this, and this, and I need that shit in life, right? So it's not kind of the same aspiration of this is going to change everything. This is more like me looking at things, probably in my 4th hour of TikTok doom scrolling, looking at that and thinking, that looks like a really good idea. Now, if it had been in my 1st hour of TikTok scrolling, I'd be like, what a load of shit, I'm fucking buying that. Well, what sort of twat would own that? Well, after 4 hours of TikTok, I'm the sort of twat who would own that, because my psychological defences against being a twat have been completely eroded by the boredom that we have nowadays. So I think there, in that incredibly long story, is the difference perhaps, that it's no longer a sort of aspirational luxury thing. It is simply another way of breaking the tedium loop for a short amount of time. So, and I'm consuming it from people who I assume are like me. They're not. You know, when I engage my brain afterwards, I get shame from doing things like that. Do you know if you get really drunk and you buy something on eBay, the shame the next day is horrendous. Like, Will Merrin does that all the time. So, boredom, according to Kingwell, where does this neoliberal boredom come from? Well, for Kingwell, boredom comes from the interfaces that we use just as much as anything on the actual networks. The interface for Kingwell is a fluid space that joins and allows interaction between platform, content and user. And it's often overlooked. Which the thing, it's actually often overlooked because it's the thing we least notice. Because if something is designed well, you don't notice the interface. It's intuitive. You know, it's easy to use. That means the interface isn't something we're paying attention to. But it's the interfaces themselves which make boredom. Now, if you think about it in terms of Tinder, that becomes clear. I'm sure if you've never been on Tinder or a dating app yourselves, you will be familiar with what I mean by this stuff. Tinder's the classic example of this, and indeed invented the kind of gesture in the context of dating apps, the swipe gesture. Swipe right to say, oh yeah, I'll have some of that. Swipe left to say, get the fuck. You know, that classic gesture is so dismissive. It might be dating apps, right? And it is like this. It's so, when you think of like, what is your aim here? To meet somebody, to have a relationship, with something meaningful, right? Maybe something more base than that, I suppose. But in my case, right, this. So what is this gesture saying? There's no thought underpinning that. It's just like, yep, no, yep, no, yep, no. It's as bad as Zuckerberg's fucking rate my hotness site that he did before Facebook, right? It's so dismissive. And it's usually the first image as well. It's like, yeah. You know, it's really bad, like, you know. Restless choosing. It's boring. One of the key things, I reckon one of the reasons why people, the average lifespan of somebody on something like Tinder is about a month. Okay? And I think one of the reasons why people quit in that time is they get bored. It is dull. Because you're just like, I can't. Do you know? It's really, really dull. The interface isn't necessarily addictive, but what it functions as is a deferral of desire. The thing that we actually went on it to use becomes replaced by the interface itself, and that becomes almost a boring thing to do. So the interfaces that we use themselves kind of generate a boredom which makes us use them more. When we scroll and swipe, it's an act that becomes addictive. One can never become to the end of such an experience. There's always more to be done. There's always more scrolling, always more swiping to do. So when we're in that interface, we're worse off than an addict. At least an addict's going to run out of money at some point. You know, if you're a junkie, you're going to be poor at some point. Do you know what I mean? You're going to run out of cash. You're never going to run out of this. You're never going to run out of content to swipe up on. Social media basically is never satisfying because there's always more. Always more. At least the heroin addict is satisfied momentarily by the hits that they get. It doesn't happen with this. We are moved to evade the grip of boredom by further stimulus rather than reflection on the nature of the inner content that this is actually provoking inside us. We're what Kingwell calls mesmerised by repetition. Just the repeat stops us from even engaging with why we are bored in the first place. Much like going to lectures, which is repeat as well. Okay. I'm going to skip over Baudrillard because he's not interesting, because my point about this is this. I've got much more interesting things to say than any of these dead French people. I call this everyday zombiehood. Now, I have to give a disclaimer to this. Apologies to zombies. Because the noble zombie has at least one thing that they want. What does a zombie want to do? What's the point of a zombie? What are they after? Whisper it. No? Somebody could. What do zombies eat? Brains. Yeah. At least a zombie has an aim in life. He's going to eat brains, right? Not my cup of tea, but, you know, whatever. We don't even have that. We haven't got what the noble zombie is after, a meal, a feast of grey matter. Instead, we are chasing something which we can never get. This is a structural despair in our lives. The individual experience of boredom and the desperation to relieve it through technology are symptoms of a pathology where boredom is chronic in everyday society, and we are like zombies chasing after the solution to it by doing the same thing that makes us bored in the first place. So we are alienated and bored. I haven't got on to despair yet, but I've got 25 minutes to do it. Lovely. Because now the lecture's going to get really fucking despairing, okay? If you thought this was bad, tone down a little bit. We're going to talk about nihilism now. Now, before we go any further, does anyone know what the word nihilism means? If anyone's ever seen the film The Big Lebowski, they might get some help. There's nihilists in The Big Lebowski, famously. Does anyone know what nihilism means? It's a belief in nothing. Belief in nothing. I couldn't. Dictionary perfect, though. A belief in nothing. However, we have to be very careful with what that, how we unpack that phrase. It is not that we believe in nothing, it is that our beliefs amount to nothing. That the content of our beliefs are in fact empty. That's what nihilism means. So it is exactly as you say, it's a belief in nothing, because the core of what we believe in amounts to nothing. Rather than saying, I don't believe in anything, which is a paradox in itself. Because if you say you don't believe in anything, it's like, well, you do believe in something. Because you believe in nothing. So, this is mostly taken from my friend Nolan Gertz's book on nihilism from 2016, which is a really, really good read. Gertz draws on Nietzsche. When we make ourselves busy to avoid finding ourselves. Nietzsche, when he was writing in the 1980s, was particularly concerned about nihilism in society, and said that in society, what you had even back then was people who were obsessed with work, people who were obsessed with religion, people who were obsessed with anything to avoid thinking about exactly what was going on in their own heads. So anything that would take them away from actually thinking about what life was important to themselves. Now for Nietzsche, basically the human being is sick of ourselves, sick of the world, and that is what nihilism is. Doing anything to avoid the important things in life. Filling your life with meaningless crap to avoid the important questions is nihilism for Nietzsche. And Nietzsche, like many other philosophers before and after him, argued that actually we should avoid doing these things and think about the important questions, no matter how disturbing they might be, no matter how problematic they might be, no matter how they might make us feel. Because if we don't do that, then we're not living an authentic existence, in fact. I like Nietzsche. He's got a bitchin' moustache. Nietzsche died of syphilis, which is unfortunate. But when he was, one of the problems if you die of syphilis is you lose your mind beforehand. And Nietzsche's sister was a bitch, and she used to park him outside the house in a chair and charge people money to come and see him, like with a can, and they would drop coins in. So he became like a tourist attraction, but he was still alive. It's pretty mad, isn't it? That's nihilistic as fuck, as well. That's one of the most nihilistic things I've ever heard. So, nihilism. The beliefs we have are the equivalent of nothing. It's a very important distinction, but it builds on Will's point, I think. What Will said is correct, but we can rephrase it a little, that the beliefs we have are nothing. It's not a belief in the idea that there is nothing, because that's a paradox of belief in itself. Pessimism and sin. Now, this is the point where I become your hero. Okay? I know for some of you, I was already there. You know, Jess, yeah. I know. But at this point, the rest of you be like, son of a bitch, he was right all along. Pessimism and cynicism, my only two qualities as a human being, are not nihilistic. I'm the anti-nihilist people. But they can lead to nihilism if we turn to mindless optimism. Nihilism for Gertz in the contemporary world It's not being pessimistic, it's not being cynical, it is being optimistic. There is no better example of nihilism in the contemporary world than one phrase which you can find at any home bargains or B&M store. And it is this: live, laugh, love. The ultimate modern nihilistic statement. Live, laugh, fucking lobotomy should be the actual phrase. You know? But nihilism in the contemporary world is actually closer to optimism, but it is a mindless optimism. It is an optimism, you know, that these things will be good. It's about evading the reality of the situation rather than confronting it. You see, the world sucks. It blows and sucks at the same time, defying the laws of physics, if one would. Because how can something blow and suck at the same time? Well, the world does. Avoiding that, saying, no, everything's okay. No, it's not so bad. What the fuck are you on about? This is terrible. Have you seen the buses? They're shit. Fucking awful. Have you seen Swansea? It looks like it's like rats have rampaged through it or something like that. It's disgusting. The country's falling apart. The world's falling apart. Cynicism and pessimism all good. Because I'm not turning away from the world. I'm embracing how shit it is. Mindless optimism of the type you will see on any Facebook feed. You know, go onto Facebook, somebody's posted some kind of inspirational message. Some kind of boomer has put up an inspirational message about how, you know, this too will pass. Fuck you. This won't pass. This is life. This is how it is. Now, for good, actually, social media encourages us to be mindlessly optimistic and therefore nihilistic. Nihilism basically emerges as a response to the ingrained boredom that we have through the use of social media. So it's not something which is unrelated to boredom, it's an actual response to it. The immersion of ourselves in everyday life through social media is a way of evading angst, is nihilistic in itself. We end up posting and consuming mindless, bland shit all the time. And who knows, eventually start believing it too. You know? How many of us follow some sort of absolute rinsehead on Instagram who's got positive messages about life? An influencer who's telling you, you know, if you do this, if you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and have some, you know, fucking mung beans for breakfast, you'll feel better about the world. You won't. The world will still blow big time, let me assure you. The acceptance is nihilism in itself. Accepting all that crap that you're fed is nihilism. The social media produced nihilism. According to Nietzsche, nihilism is hypnotic, it's a mechanical activity, it's a petty pleasure, and it's heard for me. Nihilistic behaviours are like this. So, is social media use hypnotic? Oh yeah. Is it a mechanical activity? Yeah, we do it with our hands. Is it a petty pleasure? Oh yeah, I can think of anything more petty than it is. Is it heard for me? Yeah, absolutely. Nietzsche calls this self-hypnosis. When we engage in these kind of behaviours, we're hypnotising ourselves to turn away from the world as it is and to accept the nihilistic version of the world as being something which is okay. Nietzsche's fifth symptom of nihilism is the orgy of feeling. And social media is the greatest theatre for the orgy of feeling that I've ever seen. Whenever some no-mark celebrity dies, everyone's like, oh no, R.I.P. Oh, it's so sad. No, it's not. Do you know what? Do you know why it's not sad? It's because, like, everyone's going to die. Sorry, okay? I should have given a trigger warning there, but when you think about it, you'll realise that's true. Okay? It's not sad. It's life. And that's okay. You know? And especially when it's like somebody who's sucked anyway. That's not sad. It's actually a good thing that they've stopped sucking. You know, and somebody else can suck in their place. Orgies of feeling around anger. We're all going to get angry about things at all times, you know. Isn't it terrible, all these boats coming across the channel? No, not really. It's terrible that those people are dying, but that's not what people are angry about. They're angry about, I don't know what the fuck they're angry about, to be honest. They're angry because somebody's telling them to be angry. About fear, we're always afraid of stuff. There's a paedophile on every corner. No, actually, most of the paedophile attacks come from people inside the house, not from outside the house. That's how it works. Emotions. Strong emotions have got to be expressed on things all the time. I think it's disgusting that this has happened here. We'll just need what you focus on. Social media encourages orgies of feeling. Encourages people to pile in and tell everyone how disgusted you are with this or how unhappy you are about that. Why don't you just shut the fuck up? Okay? Nobody cares. Well, unfortunately people do care, because everyone's trapped in this nihilistic thing of we've got to express ourselves at all time. The tendency to turn away from life is what we call nihilism. And our everyday social media practices are the turning away from life. Not trying to find out about what's going on, but actually turning away from what's happening and encasing themselves in a bubble of meaningless signifiers. Putting ourselves to sleep in order to avoid pain. That's not a good thing. Tinder is the great example of nihilism as far as I'm concerned. Nihilistically addictive judgment on others. Swipes as a nihilistic embodiment of social media culture and no value beyond petty aesthetics themselves. This is the roots of despair in our society. I'll need you to read the Twittering machine stuff afterwards. Because it's one that most people don't use anyway. But there's some interesting stuff that we should see on the slides. How do we finish? We are in social media cultures, this module, yeah? We are in a culture that is alienating, causes boredom and despair. Think about those things when you're doing your assignments, please. And I'll see you tomorrow. And I'll be much happier. I promise.